All right, let's move into the final topic that we have for today. Miami Hurricanes. They slipped to number 3, or got jumped rather, by the Oregon Ducks after their big win over Penn State. So we'll talk about the rankings first. Is that valid? And then we'll move into the Florida State pregame here that we have.
Yeah, so as a Miami Hurricanes fan, I think that is valid. I think that the rankings are the way that they are for a reason. And when you get a big win, especially away in college football, it should mean something. Miami has a chance to do the exact same thing, unfortunately, at a much smaller scale because of the FSU loss. But I think that that Oregon win should be credited as much as you possibly can. That is possible. I don't even want to say possibly, probably the most dangerous environment that you can go to. Like a whiteout in Happy Valley is one of the loudest crowds you'll ever see with everything that goes into playing at Penn State. And I understand they don't win big games, but still that whiteout is one of the most electric crowds you'll ever see anywhere. So I think that it should count for something. And Miami has plenty of time to get it back, or if not, like if they end up staying at like 3, even after the FSU win, I don't think that it's like a slight or any disrespect. Like Oregon at this point has like the better better top end win, and Ohio State obviously when Texas was the number 1 team in the country also has that. And when you look at overall schedules, you might think that Miami's is a little bit better, but I think those top end wins definitely help for something, especially because of the fact that Oregon wasn't trailing like a ton of spots before them. It's not like they jumped from like number 10 to number 2. They were number 6, and they played a top 3 team away and won. So I am not like super upset about the rankings, and there's plenty of time in the season where Oregon either falters or Miami just makes an incredible run and stays within that top 1 to 2 spot.
I'm not angry about it, but I do disagree. I will acknowledge that Oregon going on the road to Penn State is probably the best win from any team in the country so far. And I think we see that partially in the rankings. Now, that's why they got 16 first place votes, because others saw it above Ohio State's win against Texas. But I think that Miami's body of work is edging them out when you compare both of these teams. I like the Notre Dame win. Like, I still think that that's a really good win, even in week 1 with CJ Carr's first start for them, and the way that they were able to kind of control that game from the line of scrimmage. And I do still value, to a certain extent, USF, who received votes again this week. They will be a top 25 team, especially with the rest of their schedule at a certain point. I think that dominant win was really impressive. And then I'm okay with the way that they handled Florida. Like the score was closer than the game actually was. And I still think Florida is a talented team that plays hard. They're just not good enough to close out games. And DJ Lagway is just really bad. But Miami imposed their will on Florida in that game. I like the body of work more than I like Oregon's. I don't know. I mean, shoot, if it's almost a draw in a sense, but I would have probably liked to see Miami stick at number 2. Also because I just felt like it was a reluctant number 2 ranking for them when they jumped up. Like, it felt like they should have been number 2 a little bit sooner. So then right when they go up to number 2, then Oregon jumps them immediately. That kind of is a little bit rough to me. And then next week they have Florida State. If they beat Florida State, I do think that they should definitely jump Oregon, because Florida State, they'll probably drop out of the rankings. I still like that win, and I think it needs to be recognized. And then Oregon, off of a bye, will get a chance, if they beat Indiana, to then jump Miami again. I think we're going to see potentially flip-flops over the next few weeks between those teams. So it doesn't really matter in the long run, but that's kind of where I stand as far as Miami and Oregon.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at too. The reason why I'm like not super adamant about it is because the AP poll doesn't mean all that much, and then also it is going to be like a flip flop based off who they're playing. I feel like if any of the ACC opponents start rattling off wins, and maybe Miami gets another top 25 matchup at some point in the season, it could look a little bit better on their resume. And they maybe, if they get a big win there, they flip and jump back over Oregon, because Oregon schedule, I think Indiana is like probably the toughest team that they have left on their schedule. They don't play Ohio State this year. I think they miss out on some other tough games as well. So it could genuinely be a situation where they're just flip flopping back and forth, and they're easily two of the best three teams in the country. So I think that there's like a little bit of a distinction now between like Ohio State, Oregon, and Miami, and then coming up and bringing up the rear a little bit, Ole Miss and the teams that are behind them. But I could see a world where those three teams are like interchangeable in any given week, probably with Ohio State staying at number one for the time being, and then Miami and Oregon being a flip flop between how many first place votes they're getting in any given week.
Miami and Florida State face off this week in one of the better installments that we've got in the rivalry in recent years. Florida State was not able to uphold their end of the bargain against Virginia, unfortunately. So game day dip, they're going to Vandy, Alabama. But this still is a top 25 matchup, number 3 versus number 18. What are we thinking from Miami's perspective on this game?
Well, kind of basing it off those rankings, if you want to see the number 2 spot for Miami, it has to be like a dominant performance from like all phases of football. Like I think that Carson Beck has the ability to go out, especially with the receiving talent that he has around him, to go out and have a really good game. But if you see a performance where he is like, if he's throwing interceptions, he's back to his 2024 form rather than 2023. It could be a long night for Miami in general. Like this isn't going to be an easy win. This is a rivalry game. This is a game that both these teams like it becomes, I feel like with the transfer portal and everything around college football now, the rivalry is like not as much hated as it was like maybe growing up or like even a couple years back, but like still it is Miami versus FSU. These teams don't like each other. They want to beat each other. So I think that if Miami isn't on their A game, they can very easily lose this game, especially at Doak Campbell. But I think that they're on the opposite end of that spectrum. Miami has the talent on offense and on defense to completely outclass FSU, and we'll see how that ends up going. But FSU obviously showed some weakness, and specifically defensively last week against Virginia. And Tommy touchdowns, Tommy Castellano can be had with at times. He's a great dual threat quarterback, but that defense is definitely going to be the best that they've played so far this season, which is so refreshing to say because of how bad it was last year. Like genuinely, it's like a complete 180 for everything defensive wise for Miami this season. Ruben Bain is one of the Heisman Trophy at least candidates at this point, which is super nice to see as a Miami defense that just didn't have anything last year. And Miami is obviously the lean. Miami's my favorite team. Miami is the team that I'm going to be rooting for in this game. But look out for like at least a close game if anything goes wrong offensively, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things for FSU that they could potentially do to make this game a lot closer than some people might think. But I'll start with Miami right now. You mentioned that they have the players to outclass Florida State. Florida State has good players, but Miami on the offensive and defensive lines is dominant. They are potentially one of the best units, like offensive and defensive lines in the country, that combo. And we saw it against Notre Dame. They pushed them around. And we definitely saw that against USF. Now, I think Florida State's a lot closer to Notre Dame than they are to USF, but you have a running quarterback here or a dual threat guy, because he could throw the ball, plenty as well. But you have a running quarterback here who you're trying to stop. And I think Miami will definitely be able to do it because they just absolutely shut Byron Brown down in his rushing attack. And in my opinion, that is Florida State's key that they won't be able to have against Miami. And I think that really puts them in a bad position to be able to make this game a lot closer. Now, if they have a run game in general, then we can talk. If they're able to just run the ball behind their running backs as well and open up some of the passing game, that is where I think the pressure is taken off of Castellanos, and he can end up throwing the ball and have a little bit of a less pressured type of game. Because if he doesn't have everything on his shoulders to make plays happen on offense, that's where I can see Florida State potentially putting a few points on the board here against Miami. But I don't think that will happen. I think the offensive and defensive lines for Miami are just too good. I think they'll protect Carson Beck. I think Miami will be able to run the ball. And I think we're going to see Miami win probably by at least 2 touchdowns. I really do think this is a really good team. And yeah, I mean, maybe Florida State, maybe I'd be talking a little bit different if they didn't get caught up in that trap game last week. But that was a really, really bad showing for them. And Virginia's a good team, but not Miami.
Yeah, I will just go in a different direction slightly because of the fact that I think that loss makes them play a little bit, like maybe not drastically harder, but like the fact that they would be facing back-to-back losses and dropping out of the top 25 makes them want this win a little bit more. But I also like I can definitely see a way like a way in this game that Thomas Castellanos gets out of the pocket and is able to like run on this Miami defense, which is unfortunate. The defensive ends that Miami has are super athletic. Akeem Mesdord in the middle is like one of the best defensive players in the country, but Thomas Castellanos can really run the football. He's faster than Byron Brown was. I think was the like distinction there a little bit. And obviously he can be a pocket passer when he needs to be. So I think that FSU, I'm maybe not like 2 touchdown favorites, but I think FSU has like a chance in establishing the run game. And when you have the run game going as well as a quarterback who can throw the football, anything could happen. But I still, the lean is definitely still Miami with me, and I think that Miami might win by a touchdown, but I think that this could easily be a back and forth game.
All right. Well, I think that we covered everything. Looking forward and looking ahead, we got NBA. The NBA training camps are now kind of getting underway. The NBA season is right around the corner, and we got plenty of football on the way, as well as MLB playoffs too coming up. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But thank you guys so much for watching. This has been the Big Little Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. See you guys next time.